I think that worked. We'll find out. All right, so part two of the value around doing side projects. I think this is actually a really big one, but I would consider another one to be psychological safety. So I think having a job that or practicing a degree that is really quite subjective is hard. So if you're a designer, you've probably been told many, many times how important it is to have thick skin. But I would consider picking up a project where you have the space and privacy and autonomy to try something new, maybe get a little bit funky, investigate a new design output. You're really giving yourself the gift of not having to fear constraints and the reception to your work from other people. So it's a nice way to give your brain a little bit of a break. Portfolio building. So I know I just mentioned that side projects don't have to make it to your portfolio. Yes. However, I think as a young or new designer, sometimes the work that you have to date isn't always reflective of the job that you're looking for. Or you could be just a more seasoned designer like me. I made the transition from graphic design to UX design. So sometimes there's an opportunity to say like, oh, I don't know if I'm entirely interested in this and I want a little bit of time and space to practice a new skill. On top of that, rekindling a passion. So I know I've certainly felt this way, Carl, I'm sure you have too, but sometimes you just get a bit bogged down in day-to-day work. Can definitely speak from experience that when I try something new and experimental or just investigating a new subset of design, it's just so multifaceted that that can bring a little bit of inspiration and energy back to your day-to-day that perhaps you're not super, super in love with. So I think that that is definitely a big piece of the puzzle for me. And lastly is community building. Oh, actually, sorry, I updated this. Compounding interest. So I think that even if you don't intend to say practice illustration outside of just a fun project, a lot of times the skills and experience you gain just from investigating and getting a little bit curious about illustration, for example, really has a lot of compounding interest over time. And you can reflect back to, oh, this is a trick I learned with the pen tool, or this is something cool that I remember that really adds up in the grand scheme of things. And I would definitely say is a little bit of a trend here as I walk through sort of my experience in some of the side projects that I've done. Pause there real quick if there's any questions or things you want me to elaborate on. Cool. And next, so cool, a lot of talking. Where do I start? What I would recommend is to really identify or be open to target areas as they come up. So by that I mean, what is your goal with this? Are you looking to just sharpen an existing skill? Do you want to learn a new tool, add something to your portfolio? Just understand what it means to you when you are picking up a project, and what you want that value add to be. Sort of in the same vein as just understanding the scope. So if it's just for fun, you have the permission to let yourself get fun, maybe produce something that looks kind of shitty, but it's something that you had to practice and learn. Perhaps it's a deliverable that you, on the other side of things, really want to knock someone's socks off with. So maybe just a little bit more time and dedication to that sort of practice. Or maybe it's something that you do intend to find new work with. So just understanding where you want to go. And lastly, don't overcomplicate. I know I do this a lot in work, but it's just important to get started and not fear, oh my gosh, is this not going to turn out well? Oh, I'm not good at this. I should just not try. But don't worry about the outcome so much. Just focus on getting in there, learning new things, and sort of getting your hands dirty. Okay, so I'll walk through some personal examples. Back to the compounding interest, I put this together in a way that started sort of from a really small scale project and laddered up to one of my most recent freelance engagements. So it kind of speaks to, again, the compounding interest as well as just how far you can take this if you want to. So to kick things off, the first project I wanted to showcase here is a poster design. So if you are digital or want to be a digital designer, or are you just any type of designer? I feel like a common question is like, hey, oh, can you do a logo for me? Or can you design a poster for me? Folks are just not entirely aware of like the scope of what design is. So for me, this was a little bit of refamiliarization with print and graphic design. This was, I wouldn't say super recent, but the scope of it was to create a poster for a family member who had a very specific vision, which was carnival themed, which if you can tell from my presentation design, not really my style, not really something I'm super familiar with. So I would consider some of those constraints just one, being out of practice, working within a style I don't normally go for, and just giving myself a little bit of time and space to say, like, let's just try it. It's for a family member. It doesn't have a super high impact. So what I learned from that is just experience in an unfamiliar territory or an area that I just haven't worked in a long time. And I did end up getting some brownie points for my mother-in-law, who this was for. To add on top of that, a target area within the West Michigan mentorship program that we are all familiar with was for me to refamiliarize myself with brand and content design. So a lot of the deliverables around this were social media related, understanding how we could have an impactful and fun visual campaign that really was reflective of the program that we wish to create. I did want to call out here constraints just being time. So if you're a student or you're someone who's working, it's hard to carve out time to investigate new areas of design or pick up side projects. So just something I wanted to be honest about and know that that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And additionally, just feeling a little bit out of practice again with branding design. So to the right here is sort of where we landed with things. This was more centric to last year's program, but just a quick look at some lockups, different versions, as well as some taglines that were reflective of the program that we were creating. Also, if there's time, I do have some working files to share with you all. If you're curious, I just wasn't sure how quickly we would get through this. And so the big takeaway, what I gained here was mostly an appreciation of content design and graphic design, being out of practice, a little unfamiliar, but having had the poster engagement under my belt a little bit more with things. So content design is hard, and really just appreciation of having really good storytelling. Okay. From there, this was a project that I picked up with one of my friends who's a developer and was like, hey, I have this really cool idea. Can you make it cute? Which is a question I think a lot of people ask in different ways to designers. It's like, can you make it look better? So this was at a time where I really wasn't familiar yet with design tools in terms of how to make a design system specifically for web. So what target area I would consider for this was just really understanding Figma a little bit better, which is my preferred design tool. And just understanding how to set up and easy to use, especially for someone who's not a designer and is development minded, how to set up a system that makes place for him. Also noteworthy, this was my first time client project, so I got a little bit of practice in that regard because I said yes to helping him out. And what I gained from that primarily was I would chalk it up to experience in the design system realm and also a lot of experience just doing freelance. Another freelance engagement that built on top of that was creating a cute and easy to use website that reflected some already established branding of one of my friends. So the real thing I wanted to challenge myself in this regard was understanding what the best CMS solution for her would be, and just understanding that overall environment to make a good recommendation to that client. So my biggest constraints that I got over was just understanding all the options out there as far as CMS goes, and having a huge appreciation for Webflow, which is the CMS that we went with, and the one I used to update my portfolio website. So here I'd consider this target area just continuing to grow my skills in Webflow, knowing that it was really a good tool, super flexible, and could be something in the future to recommend more clients and of course leverage myself. So the scope for this was really just putting together a portfolio that best represents the things that I like to do, projects I've done, some of which that you've just taken a peek at. Again, time constraints. It's hard building a portfolio. It can be hard speaking to your work, writing case studies around the work and the scope. So just something that I think is always difficult and worth mentioning. So just a quick snippet of one of the sections within my portfolio, just kind of teeing up what the project is about. And we'll talk a little bit more on that later. So what I really gained here was just having an up-to-date portfolio, which is always great when you're wanting to keep your work up to date, showing what it is you do, and of course, trying to find a job that is reflective of the work that you want. I think this is my last example, but this was a fairly recent engagement, and I would call it my most recent big girl project. So this was a pretty large freelance engagement that included setting up a design system and delivering a marketing site for not one, but two different products. This was a huge effort for me personally in time management. This was at a point where I was working full time at an agency where I was just a little bit over capacity. So, calling out that that is something tricky, again, that you always have to balance and to know when to say yes or no to projects when they are tempting, but knowing that, oh, I am a little bit at capacity work wise and don't have a ton of time. So, always something to be mindful of. And yeah, I think the biggest thing I gained from saying yes to doing this was experience and practice and being the expert. So I would chalk up this experience to saying yes a lot less and challenging the client to understand what they really needed, and to make honest, good recommendations to really make the product and the branding and the website shine. So it's definitely a practice. It's sometimes hard to not just agree with everything is saying, but really considering yourself a consultant and being like, hey, this is a good idea, but let's see if we can expand it and make sure it's really the best that it can be. So that was a lot of rambling about my story and some of the different projects that I have taken on over time, just on the side. So let's talk a little bit about you all and how this can apply to where you're at. So I think the first question we can ask is like, where do I find inspiration to get started? I have a couple of different options here, knowing that these are more digitally focused. I'm a UX designer, so this is more in my wheelhouse. But one that I really appreciate is Daily UI, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So you are sent a specifically UI challenge every single day into your inbox, which is really fun. The scope is normally pretty small. It's like update this widget. How would you go about creating or updating a form field? So it's very digestible, it's fun, there's a really large community following around it. So if that is something that speaks to you, would definitely encourage it. Again, for digital-minded folks, Figma is really the leading platform in terms of product and UX design. So I would really encourage you to familiarize yourself within that community, and specifically Figma Learn is just such a great place to steal templates, looking at different design systems, just design in general. It's really easy to find inspiration, and ways for you to leverage what's already out there and put your own kind of personal spin to it. Tutorials, I think it's always great to just learn by doing, regardless of how relevant the tutorial is for you. When I was in college, I went through a really big phase of just going through Photoshop tutorials that often had pretty ugly output, but I was like, oh, I didn't know the purpose of this tool. I didn't know I could do XYZ. So if it's something you're curious about or you want to expand on, I always recommend video tutorials because it's super easy to just learn by watching and following along. And lastly, this is a term I coined in drive-by design, which is not violent, but to me is seeing something in the wild and either being triggering to you, or maybe it's not great and you have immediate ideas where you're like, oh, I really want to improve this, or if they just had done this thing differently, it would have had such a bigger impact. So I would encourage you to find instances in the wild, where you're like, I want to redesign this, or I want to make this better and fix it. For me, that's a fun way because it feels personal. It's something that you're obviously inspired by because you don't like it or want to improve it. So it's a little bit easier to just take something and run with it. So the next ugly restaurant menu you come across, which I know there's a lot, maybe consider just what you would do differently, even if it's not designing for it in whatever your tools are. Okay, on the flip side of the coin, where can I find motivation to get started? So if you're in school, if you're working, if you're just living, it's hard to find time to do things that improve yourself professionally or just on any level. So the recommendations I would have are just start small. As we called out earlier, you get to determine the scope, you get to determine what you say yes to. So really start as small as you want. If it feels like it's just going to be a little bit of investigation into how to use this specific tool, just go for it. Just try it. Additionally, time, everyone's short on time. And so I recommend just time blocking 30, 45 minutes, an hour, just to get started. Sometimes that's the hardest part, but if you tell your brain, okay, we're going to cap it at 30 minutes, cool. You have a little bit of pressure taken away and you can get started and just try some things. Community, this is a great point. Perhaps you have a mentor available who is committed to growing as well. Initiating conversation around that. So if maybe daily UI is something that you're fired up about, say, hey, do you want to go along this journey with me? Additionally, there's just great digital communities everywhere. So Figma being an example. If you get into Webflow, they actually have a really outstanding community as well. So just leveraging that as much as possible. You're not alone. There's other people that can hold you accountable and vice versa. And sort of similar to drive-by design is just finding an old project. I don't know about you all, but I have many times looked at old work and kind of cringed and thought, oh my gosh, this could have been just this much better if I would have made this change. So if that is something that is easy and feasible to you, just knowing that I could make the small adjustment and it would be better, that's great. Let's practice. That is a side project and that can get you going just as fast as starting something that's new. All right. So another, I think, very important and relevant piece to all of this is how do I add projects into my portfolio? How do I speak to work that may or may not be real or is just something that I generated because I want to or because I felt inspired? I would start by ensuring that the pieces you put into your portfolio are the ones that you want to be hired for. So if you're in transition or just looking to get into a specific area of design, cater your portfolio around that. So if you have side projects that are relevant to it, definitely lead with those. And then some more specifics. I think this is great practice for just any portfolio piece, regardless of where they come from. But make sure that you're really unpacking your process. You're highlighting kind of the findings along the way. It doesn't always have to be related specific to the project, but really you as the designer. Employers want to know how you think, how you overcome challenges, how you work with constraints. So making sure that you're really unpacking that and addressing the fact that, oh, this was something that may have been self-initiated. So ensuring that you're really telling the whole story is what we're getting at. Similarly, don't just show off the sexy, pretty stuff sort of isolated in a bubble, but really show those iterations, show the work that's not good. I know you saw a really ugly poster design of mine. Like, it's all good and important to show, again, that process, that thinking. How you went about getting to the solution is just as important as like the cute, nice mock-up that you want to highlight. And lastly, this is all kind of the same, but just be honest, tell the entire story behind the piece. So if this is something you've kind of generated out of thin air because you said, oh, I want to be a UI designer, I want to be XYZ. I think it's important to lead with that because it shows that you're motivated, that you're curious, and my cat is in the way, and that you're dedicated to a new practice in a new area of design you're interested in being hired for. So just being honest and telling that entire story. Okay, last minute parting gifts for you all that I think really is, yes, Gus did make an appearance. Really important things I wish I would have known and honestly still need to practice even as a seasoned designer. So first and foremost, just being intentional with what you agree or sign up to do, and also what you're saying no to. Um, Knowing that time constraints are a big piece of the puzzle, knowing that you can be honest and say, no, this engagement doesn't really interest me. Perhaps it's something that pays well, but you just don't feel confident in or interested in, really is the important part of it. So really just practicing those boundaries. It comes up in work, it comes up in freelance. It's just a part of the gig. Process, I think that as you're picking up side projects or generating new ideas, no process is really perfect. I think designers try to over romanticize it because sometimes things just happen, shift, constraints come up. But as much as you can, try to practice your ideal way of working in the process that you kind of want to adhere to. So it's easy to just say, oh, I'm going to make this thing really quick, but also try to consider the process you want to take and practice yourself in pushing multiple iterations and really pushing the envelope and continuing to grow. And lastly, if you hear anything, I think it's this. Don't settle for exposure or experience. If you're offered an opportunity in exchange for nothing, is what it really is, you're worth more than that. So know your worth as a designer, even if you're a student, even if you're super, super new to the industry, that's just not a great way of working. And you're worth way more than that. Your time and energy is worth way more than that. So it can be tempting, but try not to. I think that's it already. I just cruised through this. But I'll leave you with this. Just go try some stuff. Go get inspired, see where it takes you. Don't feel trapped by scope or having things be perfect, but just follow your curiosity and what you're inspired by in design, and you're always going to grow from it. And that's it. Yes. What questions do you all have? And is there anything you'd like me to circle back to? And then there may be some in the chat. Ah, just a Gus comment.
Do you have any advice for somebody looking to get into like the UX, UI, and like digital product design field? I have an industrial design background, but I've done more like marketing and graphic design professionally. So just kind of wondering if you have any like tips on that.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. I think for starters, the world of digital and UX is so big. If there's a specific area you're curious about, maybe start there and grow your way up into it. It's kind of hard to say, like, I want to transition into digital or UX, but knowing if you have a certain subset you're interested in, I think would be helpful. And two is just mentorship, community, finding people who are either also trying to make that transition or are more seasoned and can offer you advice. I have a lot of tools I can send you as well, like that are a little bit more granular. That would be helpful. But I think my biggest advice is just finding community and understanding, like maybe a little bit more specifically what you're interested in.
Okay. Do you think it's like necessary to have like an internship to get into the field, or like certain types of roles to look for?
I think it's always helpful. I wouldn't say it's necessary. I think that with side projects, there's a lot you can do to just practice and understand how that type of design is different from what you're doing currently, and also noting a lot of overlap. I think there's obviously going to be skills in design that you can translate from graphics to UX or to product, but yeah, internships are great. I think I would maybe start more so by building up your portfolio or just practicing as much as you can and working within your community to find internships. Maybe it's just job shadowing, really any sort of relevant way to get your feet wet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Carl Dunker, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of kind of add on to that. because I've made a similar transition a few times in my own career from journalism to copywriting to digital strategy. And a lot of it, honestly, is kind of, if you sort of allow your curiosity to fuel you and drive you in the directions that you want to go, that can be really helpful. On a tactical side of things, what can be really helpful is doing things where you're going to be meeting a lot of people in who work in that industry, where you can meet them and work with them and help them with something. So I'm thinking about things like I don't think they do Design for Good anymore. It's called Code for Good. Is that
Oh yeah,
it,
Code for
Caraline?
Good. Mhm.
Yeah, like those kind of like um philanthropic hackathon type deals. Like I did a few of those really early on when I was trying to get into copywriting, where I just got thrown in with like a bunch of random designers from agencies and in-house places and stuff, and I got to meet them all over the course of a weekend and like work really intensely together and form like, you know, friendships and some relationships that then kind of helped me out along the way, like down the road. So that can be a great way to meet people too, and also a great way to show people who might work at places that you'd like to work at, in jobs that you'd like to work at, that like you've got, you know, you've got the chops and you can hang with them, because you literally did over like a 72-hour period or whatever.
That's a really great call out. I've only done Code for Good once, and it was such a fun experience because you are paired or in a group with other digital UX, just digital folks, I would say, of varying like skill levels and experience. So it's not even something you have to really feel intimidated by. Like even if you came into it saying, "Oh, I'm a graphic designer who's interested in UX or digital or product, what have you," you would be welcomed with open arms, and you would find a community very close, very quickly. So definitely recommend that. It's a super fun experience, and it's just 2 days of intense heads down time with like-minded folks. What are your interests in design for all of you? I'm not sure how much all of this was relevant, being that I am more digitally minded, but is that something you guys are interested in, or more so traditional design?
Personally, for me, I'm really interested in working. I do work at an agency, so I like both digital and print, doing a lot of different kinds of things. So definitely applicable. I'm totally tracking with you on the side project stuff. Everything you're saying, I'm like, yep, so true, so true.
Oh, good to hear it.
Are there things right now that you're wanting to get into or that you're working on right now as a side project?
Good question. I just wrapped an engagement with the last piece I showed. It's called Fonister. So that was kind of a 3-piece engagement, starting with Fonister, which sort of we started by creating a parent product and parent branding, which really easily trickled down into the other projects I was on because it was an extension of that. So that was wrapped recently, and honestly, right now I'm just excited to take a little bit of a break. So nothing's cooking at the moment, but just a little bit of rest.
Cool.
Emily, how about you?
I'm interested in UX UI design. I've been primarily applying for graphic design jobs. But I do some art on the side too, so I'm hoping to like put that in my portfolio too, because I do printmaking and some other stuff too.
Excellent. Jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's another thing that I don't think I could talk about this all day, and I did include this in my talk, but for folks who maybe are a little bit more jack of all trades, master of none, more so just generalist, I think that is such an underappreciated, I guess, skill set to have in any area, but specifically in design. So if that's something you're thinking about or just reflecting on, I think it's a super great thing to have. So it's really cool to hear you say that you're also
that's
into
good.
art and printmaking. So keep at it. I think there's so many subsets of design that are all open to explore. So I think it's great that you're doing that.
Oh, thanks.
Cool. If there aren't any more questions, I think we can wrap it up. Awesome. Well, we'll send out the recorded version of this if you want to listen to it again. If you wanted to send it to anybody, I will also send out a little bit of a recap to everyone, as well as announcing our next guest speaker, which I believe is slated for the 15th of November. Is that right, Carl? It's a Thursday.
I believe that's what we were shooting for.
Oh, the
so up to
16th.
16th. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what we were shooting for. I know you were talking with him, so I guess you know his availability better than me.
Yeah, yep. I just remembered it was a Thursday, so it is the 16th. We'll send out details, but we are having a guest speaker talk to design systems, specifically within UX UI. So got some digital folks here. Will probably be a really engaging, fun conversation. And this guy is very detailed and can get in the weeds so quick that it's just really fun to follow along with his his journey. So I think you're really gonna like it.
Yeah. He definitely is somebody where it's like you just have to kind of grab on and hang on as he talks, because
he's very passionate.
He's like a golden retriever that you just let out into the backyard. He just kind of goes.
He's actually doing design system work right now for my company, and from what I've heard from Shandon, who's one of our mentors, he's just absolutely crushing it. So super excited to see what he has to say. I think it'll be really fun. But I appreciate you guys all coming and asking questions. If anything else pops up in the meantime, feel free to reach out to Carl or I, but hopefully we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Bye, guys.
See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.